Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. I sat quietly in the car with my dad, staring out the window as if I were in a music video. I almost wished it was a music video, something fictional, far from reality. I wished I wasn't on my way to my mum's funeral. I wished there was no funeral at all, because I wished she was still alive. But no matter how hard I wished, I knew that wouldn't change anything. It took us a few hours to reach my mum's house. That's where we were meeting up with her side of the family, Richard, my half-siblings, and everyone else, before heading to the service together. When we arrived, Dad knocked on the door. We were both dressed in black suits, the air heavy with silence. Riley, my sister, opened the door. She looked beautiful in her black dress, though the sadness behind her eyes was impossible to miss. Knowing Mum, she would have wanted a colorful funeral. If it had been up to her, we'd all be wearing bright clothes, maybe even dancing. But since she never got the chance to plan it herself, it fell to Richard, and apparently Riley, to decide. "Come in," Riley said softly, offering a small smile. We stepped inside and followed her into the kitchen where the others were gathered. Everyone was dressed in dark suits and dresses. Some were watching TV quietly, others just sitting in stillness. "Where's your dad?" I asked her. "Outside," she said, pointing toward the back door. I gave a small nod and headed out. The garden was long, and at the far end, I saw Richard standing alone by a vibrant flower bed. Approaching him made me a little nervous. I wasn't sure he wanted to see me. Still, I walked toward him. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a moment. There was a flicker of a smile, the kind that tried to be strong but didn't quite reach his lips. I couldn't blame him. "These were your mum's flowers," he said quietly. "We planted them together, but she was the one who kept them alive." I nodded, a sad smile tugging at my mouth. She always knew how to make things feel normal, even when everything wasn't. Richard looked back at the flowers, then at me. If only she could do that now. My eyes burned with unshed tears, but I kept them in. Richard looked like he was barely holding himself together, and I didn't want to make it any harder for him. "I think we should head out soon," I said gently. "The service starts in about 30 minutes. He nodded and began walking back to the house. I followed. Inside, I saw my dad and Riley talking, their conversation serious but calm. It was oddly comforting to see our families getting along. "Come on, everyone," Richard called out. My siblings stood up, quietly fixing their jackets and smoothing out their dresses. We left shortly after, driving in a small procession. Dad's car followed Richard's, and after a 20-minute drive, we arrived at the crematorium. Mum was being cremated. I hadn't really been part of that decision, but I agreed with it. The idea of her resting in the ground under a gravestone just didn't feel right. A cremation somehow felt more peaceful, more like a final gift. As we entered the building, soft music played through the speakers. The moment I heard the melody, I knew exactly what it was: Wings by Birdie. It had been Mum's favorite song since 2013. We took our seats at the front. Mum's coffin rested nearby, surrounded by framed photos, snapshots of her life and of us. The largest one showed her smiling brightly, her curly brown hair falling over her shoulders. No one could take that smile from her. It belonged only to her. She had been such a light. Even when things weren't perfect, she smiled. She made people feel good just by being near them. I scanned the photos. There were plenty of pictures of just the two of us. I always loved taking selfies with her. Not because I was vain, though maybe a little, but mostly because having her beside me made every picture feel brighter. There were photos of her with Richard, with my siblings, with all of us as a big, blended family. One photo even showed her and my dad on their wedding day, before everything changed. I wondered if that photo bothered Richard. But today wasn't about him. It was about Mum. When I looked back at the coffin, I noticed it was surrounded by her favorite flowers. It had been months since I last saw her. I couldn't even remember the exact day. I used to make excuses not to visit, Mostly because of Richard. He never really liked me. I never imagined I'd lose her so soon. And now I was here, at her funeral, struggling to recall the last time we hugged, or talked, or laughed together. The music faded, and a priest stepped up to speak. He shared words about Mum, warm and thoughtful. Then he invited my 10-year-old brother, Jacob, to come forward. 10 years old, and already having to say goodbye to his mother. Jacob walked up, holding a piece of paper in both hands. He read a poem he had picked himself. His voice was small but clear. When he finished, he looked at the coffin and said, "I'm gonna miss you, Mum." He didn't cry, but I knew he wanted to. He was trying to be brave. Next came Riley. She stood at the front, smiling through the pain. She shared stories, funny memories and inside jokes, the kind of things that made the room fill with gentle laughter. "Mum was a little crazy," she said, "but the good kind, the kind that makes you smile when you're having a bad day." She always had a smile on her face to brighten ours. Then came the part that broke everyone's composure. "Mom," Riley said softly, "I know you're watching. I want you to know I'll be strong, for you and for all of us. We love you so much. Thank you for always being there, and for loving us the way you did." She returned to her seat without letting a single tear fall. Finally, my youngest sister Rose stood up. Just 7 years old, she clutched her paper and walked confidently to the front. She looked at all of us, took a deep breath, and began reading. "Mummy, we're all going to miss you. You were always kind to me and did mummy things like doing my hair for school every morning. My teachers and friends would say how nice it looked. You bought me toys and clothes I liked. We even had matching light-up shoes. You also took care of my brothers and sisters, because you're the best mummy. You treated Daddy like a king, and you made us feel like princesses and princes. But you were the queen, the beautiful queen with curly hair and a big smile. I love you, Mummy. I'll miss you so much." As she looked up, a single tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly and returned to her seat, her head held high. I gritted my teeth, holding back the tears as Rose quietly returned to her seat. My little brother Jacob gently pulled her into a hug, comforting her the way only a sibling could. The other two of my siblings didn't speak during the service. Not because they didn't care, but simply because the idea of standing in front of everyone was too overwhelming for them. The lump in my throat ached, but I refused to let myself cry, at least not yet. The priest returned to the front, speaking a few more words before pausing to look at us all. "You are welcome to come forward and say your goodbyes," he said gently. Our family stood up first. Mum's friends would take their turns afterward if they wished. One by one, we walked toward the coffin, silent and solemn. None of us made eye contact. We were each lost in our own memories. Some of us placed a hand on the coffin. Others simply stood still. I felt a small tug on my sleeve and looked down to see Rose beside me. "Lucas," she whispered, "can I have a hug?" I smiled softly and nodded. "Of course you can." She wrapped her arms around my waist, the only part of me she could reach, and I hugged her back, gently stroking her soft brown hair. We stood there quietly, side by side, looking at the coffin. After a few more minutes, we all said our final goodbyes. A few of Mum's closest friends came up after us, standing for a moment in respectful silence. Eventually, we stepped outside. The air felt cooler, and we stood around in small groups, speaking quietly to one another. "Maybe we could all go out for lunch," Riley suggested carefully, glancing toward her dad. "You know, to celebrate Mum's life." Richard looked down for a moment, clearly deep in thought. Then he nodded, eyes glistening. "Why not?" he said with a soft sigh. "She wouldn't want us stuck in sadness forever. Let's go honor her with a proper meal." Riley smiled gently, visibly proud of the idea. A little while later, we arrived at a restaurant. We chose a quiet table, ordered some food, and were told it would take about 20 minutes. Richard excused himself and stepped outside for a smoke. After 10 minutes or so, I followed. I found him leaning against the wall of the restaurant, a cigarette between his fingers. I walked over. "Got another one?" I asked. I wasn't planning on picking the habit back up, but today felt different. Richard raised an eyebrow and pulled out a pack. "Didn't know you smoked." "I don't." Not usually. Only when I'm stressed, I admitted. He handed me one, and I placed it between my lips. He lit it for me without saying a word. He gave a faint smile. You and I both know smoking doesn't really fix anything. But hey, we pretend it does. I chuckled quietly and nodded. I'm gonna stop by the house later, I told him. Pick up the stuff I left behind from visiting Mum. Thought I'd just clear it out. He looked at me, a little taken aback. So that's it? You're just leaving after the funeral? Are we not going to see you again? I mean, I'll still visit my brothers and sisters, I said, surprised by his tone. I just didn't think you'd care much. Why wouldn't I care? He asked, his brows furrowed. I hesitated. I always thought you didn't really like me. Especially after Mum told you I was gay. You started acting different. Richard's eyes widened. No, Lucas. I'm not like that. I'm not against you. I do like you. He paused, looking down at his feet. Then why'd you change? I asked quietly. He sighed. When your mum told me she was so proud of you. She'd always talk about how amazing you were, her perfect first child. The others felt left out, especially Jacob. He once told me he felt like he didn't matter as much. So I tried to back off a little, to give them some space. But I realize now that distancing myself from you wasn't the right way to handle it. I'm sorry if I made you feel unwelcome. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Richard squinted at me. Wait, is that why you stopped visiting? I looked down, saying nothing. The silence answered his question. Richard rubbed his face in regret. I'm so sorry. I swallowed hard. It's been so long since I last saw her. Since I last really talked to her. And now I'll never get to again. I didn't even get the chance to explain. He was quiet for a long moment. She thought you didn't like being around her, Richard said. She thought maybe she annoyed you. But really, it was me who made you uncomfortable. He threw his cigarette to the ground, his voice heavy with guilt. A tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly, but more followed, faster than I could stop them. I covered my face with both hands. She died thinking I didn't want to be near her. Richard gently took hold of my arm and turned me toward him. No, he said firmly. She knew you loved her. He pulled me into a hug, and I didn't resist. I let the tears fall in silence. These past few weeks haven't exactly been kind to me, I mumbled, trying to collect myself. Richard leaned back. What else has happened? Oh, nothing big, I said with dry sarcasm. Aside from losing Mum, I got stabbed, and my boyfriend, who happens to be rich and famous, just got outed publicly. So yeah, it's been a little hectic. You got stabbed? Richard's eyes widened in shock. I nodded. Didn't really get the chance to tell anyone. Sorry. His face softened. I'm just glad you're okay, mate. Maybe Richard wasn't so bad after all. We walked back into the restaurant together. The food arrived shortly after, and we ate while sharing quiet memories of Mum. Later, we returned to the house where we watched old videos, flipped through photo albums, and just talked. As the evening wore on, Dad and I said our goodbyes and made the 2-hour drive home. I was emotionally drained. When I got to my room, I didn't even message Alex. I just collapsed into bed and let the silence carry me into sleep. I woke up early and went out for breakfast with my dad. We talked about Mum for a while, then I told him that Richard and I had finally had a proper conversation and sorted things out. Eventually, the conversation turned to Alex, which led to me mentioning the tension between him and Emily. After breakfast, we walked to work together. I was hoping to bump into Alex once we arrived. As we approached the building, I noticed a small group of people with cameras hanging around near the entrance. It took me a moment to realize they were paparazzi, still hanging around trying to catch a photo of Alex. Then one of them spotted me. Her eyes widened as she raised her camera and started snapping photos, rushing in my direction. Great. I guess I'm part of the story now too. Seriously? I muttered under my breath, rushing inside. My dad, clearly confused and a bit alarmed, followed me in and shut the door behind us. What on earth was that? He asked, frowning as he signed into work. We continued walking toward the elevator. Emily told them I was Alex's boyfriend, I said as we stepped into the lift. Dad let out a heavy sigh. Someone needs to talk to her about this. Isn't there anything you can do? Get help from the police maybe. No. I'm done dealing with the police. I really don't want to get involved with all that again, I replied, pulling out my phone and calling Alex. Hey, are you in your penthouse? I'm coming up now, I said quickly. Yeah, I'm here. You okay? You sound upset, Alex replied, concern in his voice. I'll explain when I get up there. See you in a minute, I said before hanging up. The elevator stopped and Dad headed off to work. I continued up to Alex's penthouse. When I stepped out of the lift, one of the receptionists greeted me kindly. Good morning, Lucas, she said with a warm smile. I gave a polite smile back. Good morning, I replied. As I entered the penthouse, I saw Alex lounging on the sofa with his laptop. The TV was on in the background. He looked up and smiled at me, shifting his legs so I could sit down. I walked over, sat beside him, and gently lifted his legs onto my lap. What's going on? He asked, setting his laptop on the coffee table. It's Emily, I began. His expression immediately changed. She told the paparazzi about us. Now they're outside trying to get pictures of me. I looked at him, frustrated and worn down. It's already hard enough with reporters asking about the stabbing. I don't need people shouting questions about my personal life when I'm just trying to walk to work. Alex stood up, his jaw tightening with frustration. Stay here. I'll be right back. He stormed out of the penthouse. I sat there, confused, and turned my attention to the TV. A few minutes later, I heard voices outside the door, Alex's and someone else's. I stood up and moved around the sofa just as the door opened. Alex walked in, with Emily. She looked annoyed. Alex looked furious. She made eye contact with me and paused, her expression flickering. I crossed my arms and leaned back against the sofa, silent. There was a long pause before Emily spoke. What am I even doing here? So, he can just glare at me? She snapped, clearly irritated. I wanted to fire something back at her, but I stayed quiet. I wanted to take the high road. I want you to apologize, Alex said sternly. Emily turned to him, folding her arms. For what exactly? You know what you did, he replied, glaring. She shrugged like it was nothing. So what? You're mad I talked to the press? That I mentioned Lucas? It's bad enough you outed me, Alex said, his voice rising slightly. But dragging Lucas into it? He's already going through enough. Oh, come on. What's he going through that's so dramatic? She said dismissively. Everyone's got problems. I clenched my fists but looked down, doing my best not to react. Alex's voice hardened. He just lost his mum. Then he got stabbed. Both in the same week. Emily's shoulders sank. Her arms dropped to her sides and she stared at the floor. You've just made things so much worse for yourself, Alex said, shaking his head. Emily looked up at me. I'm sorry. I didn't. Save it, I cut in sharply. Just keep your comments to yourself in the future. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I didn't want to be in the same room with her, but I still wanted to hear what was going on. From the other side of the archway, I listened as the argument continued. You've really crossed a line, Alex said. No wonder things between us fell apart. Oh, come on. That's not why you cheated on me and you know it, Emily replied, trying to keep her cool. Why were you with me in the first place if I'm such a terrible person? I didn't love you. It was all just for show, Alex answered calmly. Really? Then why the dinners, the photos, meeting your family? Who are you trying to convince, me or Lucas? She hissed. I closed my eyes and sighed, leaning against the wall. I thought we were friends, Alex said. But now? What is this jealousy? Maybe a little, Emily admitted quietly. A little? You've ruined everything, for me and for yourself. You let jealousy wreck your career and our friendship. That's just sad. Emily didn't hold back. Says the guy too scared to tell his dad he's gay. There was silence. Get out, Alex said, his voice low but firm. You brought me up here, she shot back. I said get out, he shouted suddenly. I flinched slightly at his raised voice. Moments later, I heard the door slam shut. Alex returned to the kitchen, his expression softening. Sorry I mentioned your mom, he said gently. What she said really crossed the line. I wanted her to understand just how much you've been through. No, it's okay, I replied, managing a small smile. Honestly, I'm kind of glad you did. She needed to hear it. I brought her up here to apologize, but that clearly didn't go as planned, Alex sighed. Just then, Alex's phone chimed. He pulled it from his pocket and glanced at the screen. It's my mom, he said, and I leaned over to read the message with him. Mom, hi love. Your dad, Holly, Mason, and I are coming over tonight. We haven't seen you in a while, so we thought we'd visit. Maybe you could cook us dinner? See you tonight. Love, Mom. Alex let out a long breath and rubbed his eyes. You want to meet my parents tonight? I smiled. Of course I do. But it might make it easier for me to finally come out to them, if you're there, he added with another sigh. Wait, who are Holly and Mason? Holly's my twin sister. Mason's my 15-year-old brother, Alex explained. I didn't know you had a twin. Actually, we've never really talked about your family, I said, frowning thoughtfully. Yeah, I just realized that. It's weird how we're dating but haven't even shared that stuff yet. He gave me a sheepish grin. I nodded, and we spent the next little while swapping stories about our families. Some strange, some funny, all bringing us a little closer. I stayed at the office with Alex for the rest of the day. I didn't want to go home. Not alone. Not yet. It still scares me being on my own out there ever since the attack. And the person who did it still hasn't been caught. Alex finished work around 2 p.m. and we headed to his place. On the way, we stopped by the store to pick up groceries for dinner. Normally, he said he'd ask the butler to handle it, but tonight was different. It was his family and he wanted to do it himself, with a bit of help from me. We got back and unpacked everything, but it was still too early to start cooking, so we relaxed on the couch and watched some TV. Around 4 p.m., there was a knock, followed by the doorbell. Alex jumped up and went to greet them. I sprang off the couch, practically sprinted into the kitchen, and began prepping the food. Okay, maybe prepping is a stretch. I mostly stood there, pretending to be busy, nervously hoping I wouldn't have to face his family right away. The idea of strangers judging me, especially ones that mattered to Alex, made my stomach twist. I could hear their cheerful voices as they greeted him. Still, I lingered in the kitchen, pulling out ingredients and standing awkwardly, trying to summon the courage to go out there. Technically, they didn't know I was his boyfriend yet, so maybe I was overthinking it. But honestly, I'd never felt this nervous before. I've always been confident, even a bit reckless. But ever since the attack, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not the same. I finally walked out, meeting Alex's eyes across the room. He smiled warmly at me just as his mum started speaking. Oh, you have a friend over. Yeah, this is Lucas, Alex said, motioning to me. Nice to meet you, Lucas, she said with a kind smile, shaking my hand. Staying for dinner? Yes, he is, Alex quickly answered. I'm sure he can speak for himself, sweetheart, she chuckled. I'm Alex's mum, Jillian, she added as we let go of the handshake. The rest of the family had already made themselves comfortable in the living room. That's my husband Johnny over there, and beside him is Holly, my daughter, and Mason, my youngest. I smiled and nodded at them. Soon, Alex and I returned to the kitchen to start cooking. His family occasionally wandered in and out, chatting as we prepared the meal. At one point, Holly strolled into the kitchen and stood next to Alex. She leaned in and whispered something, though I still heard it loud and clear. Alex, if you're gonna let your friend leave marks on your neck, you might want to cover them up next time, especially when Mum and Dad are visiting. I bit the inside of my cheek to hide a grin. I don't have girlfriends, Alex replied, slightly exasperated. Oh, then what are you doing in your spare time? Holly raised her eyebrows teasingly. Nothing. Just, Holly, drop it, he said firmly. She laughed softly and walked back into the living room, giving me a warm smile on her way out. Alex joined me at the counter again, standing close enough that our arms brushed. I'm gonna tell them during dinner, he said softly. Just be prepared. It might get awkward. I nodded, heart thumping. An hour later, dinner was ready. Alex, his mum, and I served the dishes and brought everything to the large dining room table. We ate in silence at first, the clinking of cutlery the only sound. Then the family began to chat. Eventually, the conversation turned to me. They asked if Alex and I had just become friends recently, since they'd never seen me before. I was about to respond, but held back. This wasn't my moment, it was Alex's. He cleared his throat. "So, there's something I need to tell you all," he began, voice steady but nervous. "I'm kind of surprised you haven't already found out. It's on social media. And, well, others too." Johnny's eyes narrowed in concern. "What did you do?" "It's not about something I did," Alex said. "It's about who I am." "What do you mean?" his father asked, his expression tensing as if he were bracing for something unexpected. Alex took a deep breath, glanced at me, and then said, "I'm gay." There was a pause. Mason immediately punched Holly's arm and grinned. "I told you. You owe me £5. Jillian's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she didn't look upset. Just processing. I glanced at Johnny. His face had gone completely still. Without a word, Johnny stood and walked away from the table. "Come with me," he said firmly, motioning for Alex to follow. Alex looked at me with a mix of worry and resolve before getting up and going after his dad. Alex's POV. I walked into the hallway with my dad, who was still glaring at me. I frowned, confused and frustrated as we locked eyes. "What exactly do you mean it's on your social media?" he asked, clearly annoyed. I took a deep breath, preparing myself to explain. "I posted it on my Instagram and some other platforms because—" "Why would you do that?" he interrupted sharply. "Because You don't need to announce everything to the world, Alex. Especially something that could affect our business relationships. You asked me why I did it, so let me finish," I said firmly, raising my voice. He straightened slightly, waiting for my response. "What reason could possibly justify putting the company at risk?" he demanded. "I'm not putting the company at risk," I replied, trying to keep calm. "Do you remember Emily? My ex?" Dad gave a tense nod. "We broke up because of my sexuality, but we stayed friends. At least I thought we did. Recently she got upset and tried to out me publicly. I found out ahead of time, so I made the post myself." Dad's expression didn't change. "You didn't hear about it because I wanted you to hear it from me first. I figured that was better than you seeing it online." He folded his arms. "What did she post exactly?" "It wasn't what she said, it was the photo," I said with a sigh. "And what was in the photo?" I hesitated, then told him, "Lucas isn't just my friend, Dad. He's my boyfriend." His arms dropped to his sides, stunned. "She snuck into my house and took a photo of us, kissing. That's what she posted." Dad's eyes narrowed. "You've still taken a huge risk. Everything I've built could be on the line. There's a reason I didn't leave the company to Ollie. It wasn't personal, it was to protect what we've worked for." My heart sank at his words. "Yeah, I know exactly why you didn't give Ollie the company. And that's the same reason I never told you about me." "Don't blame this on me," Dad said sharply. "You've put my company in jeopardy." "Your company?" I echoed, stepping back. "You gave it to me. And yes, I lost one business deal, just one, because they didn't support who I am. But guess what? I gained 3 new deals because of it. So no, I didn't ruin anything. I made it better." I turned to walk away, but Dad grabbed my arm, stopping me. "Alex," he said, letting out a sigh before releasing me. "You know I'm not against you. I love Ollie. I love you. I'm just scared. I don't want either of you to be hurt by how the world reacts. I'm sorry." I stared at him, trying to hold back tears. "Sometimes it doesn't feel like you mean that," I whispered, then turned and walked into the kitchen. Lucas and my mom were at the sink, washing dishes. I could tell they had heard everything. Lucas POV. I stood quietly by the sink as Jillian continued rinsing the plates. When Alex entered, I smiled at him, and he offered me a small, tired smile in return. I had never felt so awkward in my life. Just before the shouting began, Alex's mom had asked me to bring the dishes into the kitchen. That's when she looked at me and said, "You're Alex's boyfriend, aren't you?" Caught off guard, I replied softly, "Yes." She smiled knowingly, but before we could talk more, the arguing in the hallway began. I wasn't sure how she knew, maybe she just pieced it together after Alex came out. Alex's dad, Johnny, soon walked through the kitchen in silence and headed straight to the living room. "I can finish up here. Why don't you all go sit down?" I offered. "Lucas, it's okay," Alex started to say, but I gently cut him off. "Really, it's fine. You guys probably need to talk." He gave me a grateful look, and he and his mom went into the living room. I kept washing dishes, overhearing a few snippets of conversation. "Is Lucas your boyfriend?" I heard Mason ask, but their voices faded as they moved further into the room. I joined them later. We talked, watched some TV, and eventually, Alex's family began saying their goodbyes. Johnny approached Alex. "I'm sorry, son. I didn't mean to sound disappointed. I was just overwhelmed. But I shouldn't have said those things. I'm proud of you." He pulled Alex into a hug. I looked away, not wanting to intrude. After everyone left, Alex and I finished tidying up the table and putting away the dishes. "We should go for a midnight drive," I suggested casually. "It's 7 p.m., Alex said, raising an eyebrow. "Sorry, precise Polly. An evening drive then," I teased. He rolled his eyes but chuckled. "All right, come on then." We walked down to the garage and I picked the car I wanted us to take for a spin. It was a matte black Audi R8 with tinted windows, and it looked absolutely stunning. I pointed to the car with excitement and practically jogged toward it as Alex unlocked a drawer and pulled out a set of keys. "Where do you want to go?" Alex asked, following me toward the vehicle. "I don't know, maybe just drive around? Stop off for some food?" I suggested. Alex paused, then smiled. "How about you take the wheel first?" he offered, dangling the keys in front of me. My eyes widened. I don't know how to drive. And what if I get caught? Alex shrugged casually. "I'll teach you. We'll go somewhere quiet. No one will even notice. And if we do get caught, well, we'll handle it." I hesitated, biting my lip. "Are you sure?" He nodded, and soon we were heading to a quiet, open road near the cliffs. It was peaceful there, no cars in sight, just the sound of the wind and the ocean beyond. Alex gave me a quick rundown on the basics: steering, signaling, braking. It was overwhelming at first, but also exciting. I was awful in the beginning, nervous and jerky with every move, but Alex just laughed and reassured me. "You're doing better than you think," he said. Eventually, I started getting the hang of it. I relaxed, and we shared laughs every time I panicked unnecessarily. It felt good, freeing even. "All right," Alex said eventually, "let's head into the city and grab something to eat. I'll drive this time. You're not quite ready for main roads yet." "Yeah, I'd rather not accidentally hit anyone," I chuckled. "You take over." We swapped seats, and he drove us into the city. We got caught in traffic pretty quickly, though. Music played softly in the background while we sat idle, watching the endless rows of cars stretch ahead. "I shouldn't have taken this route," Alex muttered, tapping the wheel impatiently. I smirked at him. "You're rich and famous. Don't you have someone who can fly you over the traffic or something?" He laughed. "I'm not a president. Just a guy with a car stuck like everyone else." We sat in silence for a while longer. I glanced at the heavily tinted windows and asked, "Can anyone see inside?" Alex shook his head. "Nope, not even a glimpse." I leaned back, letting my head rest against the seat. "It's kind of nice. Feels like we're in our own little world." He turned and looked at me, smiling softly. "Yet it does." A few seconds passed in silence, and then he quietly asked, "What made you ask?" I shrugged and grinned. "Just curious. It's nice to feel invisible sometimes." He nodded, understanding. I turned to him and gently said, "Thanks for today. I really needed it." Alex gave me a warm look and reached for my hand, squeezing it. "You're welcome." Eventually, traffic started to move again. We got food from a little place Alex liked and ate as he drove me home. When we pulled up outside, he leaned over and pressed a gentle kiss to my lips. I felt his smile against mine and couldn't help but smile back. Whatever he was going through with his company or in life, I was just happy to see him this relaxed, this light. He needed this moment just as much as I did. I climbed out of the car, waved goodbye, and headed inside. I spent a bit of time with my dad, just talking and watching TV, before heading upstairs to bed. As I lay in bed, my mind began to wander, overthinking everything. The past, the fears, the trauma, and then my thoughts drifted to Alex. Just thinking about him helped ease my nerves, and eventually, I let sleep take me. About a week and a half had passed since everything, and I woke up early for my hospital appointment. I was finally getting my stitches out. It was around 9 a.m. when I made my way downstairs, still groggy and craving breakfast. But as I entered the kitchen, I froze in place, wide-eyed in horror. My dad and a woman I'd never seen before were clearly caught up in a very private moment, right there against the counter. I gasped audibly, alerting them both, before spinning around and bolting out of the kitchen, nearly walking straight into the hallway wall. "Lucas!" I heard my dad yell, followed by frantic movement behind me. I plopped down on the couch in the living room, trying to steady my racing thoughts and waiting until it felt safe to go back in for breakfast. About a minute later, Dad walked in, still adjusting his shirt, face flushed redder than a tomato. "I'm so sorry," he blurted out, breathless. "I didn't think you'd be up this early." I forced a nervous grin. "Hey, it's your house. You don't have to explain anything to me." "You sure?" he asked, clearly embarrassed. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "Honestly, I'm glad you're moving on." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" I shrugged. "You haven't really had a serious relationship since you and Mum split up. That was, what, 15 years ago? I know you've dated, but it's never seemed serious." He chuckled softly and looked down. "Yeah, this time it might be different." "You seeing her, then?" He nodded with a small smile. "Yeah, her name's Kate." Right on cue, she walked into the living room and sat down beside him. "Hi," she said kindly, reaching out a hand. "I'm Kate." I smiled and shook her hand, trying not to let the awkwardness show. "Nice to meet you." Dad turned to her. "I have to take Lucas to the hospital to get his stitches out. You're welcome to come along or stay here or head out, whatever you prefer." "I'll come if that's okay," she replied, and Dad gave her a nod. A little while later, the three of us sat in the hospital waiting room. It was quiet at first, until Kate gently asked, "Can I ask what you got stitches for? Unless that's too personal." I hesitated. I never liked talking about it. But I nodded and replied, "I was stabbed a few weeks ago." A shocked expression crossed her face. "Oh my gosh. I didn't know things like that happened around here." Dad chimed in. "He was on the news." "Really? I must have missed it," Kate said, eyebrows raised. Soon, a nurse called my name and led me into a room. After removing the stitches, she sat me up and gave me some advice. "You'll still need to take it easy for a while," she explained. "Give it a bit more time to fully heal." I nodded. "So, I'm all clear to get back to normal activities?" She smiled knowingly. "Yes, but ease into it. Don't rush anything that puts too much strain on your body." Fair enough. After the appointment, Dad dropped me off at Alex's place as I'd requested. I wasn't sure if he was home, but after a few knocks, the door opened and there he was, smiling. I stepped inside and followed him to the kitchen, where he was chopping up vegetables. "What's up?" Alex asked, glancing my way. "I've got something to show you," I said, grinning as I hopped onto the counter. He looked over curiously, eyebrows raised. I lifted my shirt slightly, revealing the now stitch-free scar on my stomach. Alex's face lit up. "Oh, you got your stitches out?" I nodded, watching his smile fade slightly as he stepped closer, wrapping me in a hug. I held him tightly, feeling the unspoken emotion behind his gesture. "I'm okay," I whispered. He nodded. "I know." Alex let go and returned to cooking, but not before his fingers briefly brushed mine. A small, affectionate gesture that said more than words. "Hey, I was thinking," I started, "now that I'm healing up, maybe soon we could." He looked up, tilting his head. "We could what? You know, be more physical again?" Alex blushed slightly and gave a shy smile. "Yeah, soon." He laughed quietly, then changed the topic. So, I've got an interview today. After that, I've got dinner plans with a company owner and his wife. Want to come? As your boyfriend? I asked, raising an eyebrow. He rolled his eyes. Yes, obviously. Why wouldn't you? I just wasn't sure how public you wanted to be. Lucas, people already know I'm gay. This guy knows, and he still wants to work with me. It's fine. I nodded, smiling. Then sure, I'll come. After finishing lunch, Alex loaded the dishwasher while I waited. He looked up from the sink. Want to ride somewhere before I head out for the interview? I'll pick you up at 7 for dinner. Can you drop me at Amy's? He agreed, and after getting ready, we left together. I spent about 3 hours at Amy's house. We caught up on everything, family, Alex, and all the recent drama. After that, we just hung out, played Xbox, and talked about nothing in particular. Eventually, I called a taxi to take me home. I made myself a snack and then jumped in the shower, taking my time to get ready. I put on my nicest clothes, including the Armani shirt Alex had bought me a while back. Just as I finished getting dressed, I heard a knock at the door. I rushed down and opened it to see Alex smiling at me. Ready? Yeah, let's go, I said, locking the door behind me. We drove to an upscale restaurant downtown, where Alex had a table reserved for us and his business contact. When we arrived, the table was already occupied by a man in a tailored suit and his wife. George, good to see you, Alex greeted him, shaking his hand. I took a seat quietly as they dove into business talk. Eventually, the waitress came by and I finally paid attention, placing my order off a menu full of dishes I'd never heard of, but I was open to trying something new. To avoid zoning out, I struck up a conversation with George's wife about food, which quickly became a lively discussion. A bit later, George turned to me. Wait a second, are you Lucas Myers? He asked, surprised. I blinked. Yeah, why? I saw your name in the news. About the stabbing and the stuff involving Alex. I didn't put it together. Are you doing okay? I gave a small smile. I'm all right. Thanks for asking. George nodded respectfully and went back to his meal. After dinner, Alex offered to take me back to his place, and of course, I said yes. Once Alex and I got back to his house, we went into the kitchen, where he offered me a drink. I accepted. It was just something light, but even a mild drink felt welcome after such a long day. So, Alex said, handing me the glass, what do you want to do? I thought for a moment. We could watch a movie in your cinema room. He smiled and nodded, and we headed downstairs together. He turned on the lights and grabbed the remote, and soft background music started playing, probably something he had queued up from earlier. What do you want to watch? He asked, glancing at me. But I wasn't really thinking about movies. I just looked at him. His presence, the way he stood, his calm energy. Everything about him drew me in. He turned to look at me again, waiting for an answer, but I stepped forward and gently cupped his face. I kissed him softly. He didn't hesitate. He kissed me back, his arms wrapping around me with warmth and security. Without breaking the kiss, we moved toward the large sofa and gently fell onto it, Alex hovering above me. I reached for the hem of his shirt, lifting it slightly, but he paused and pulled back, sitting upright on my lap. What is it? I asked, concerned. He looked at me, then spoke gently. Do you want to go further? I hesitated for a second, then gave a small nod. Yeah, I do. Alex smiled softly, leaning back down to kiss me again. Just as our lips met, I paused and whispered, Wait, can you turn off the light? It's kind of bright and I don't exactly feel flattering under it. He chuckled as he stood up. You look amazing. But fine, anything for you. Want a red carpet and a crown while I'm at it? I laughed. Maybe just the light for now. Once the room was dim, he came back over. Better. Much better, I said with a grin. We continued kissing, slowly at first, exploring the moment. There was something different about this. It wasn't just physical. It was patient, meaningful. Eventually, he pulled away just enough to look at me, his expression soft and thoughtful. He brushed his fingers along my jaw, then leaned down and placed small kisses along my neck and collarbone. Even with the emotions running high, Alex was gentle. He checked in with me constantly, Not with words every time, but with his eyes, his touch, his pace. He was present, respectful, and completely in tune with how I felt. At one point, he sat back and glanced down at the scar still healing on my stomach. His smile faded for a second as he reached out and traced it carefully with his fingers, his face clouded by concern. I looked down at his hand, then placed mine over it. "Hey," I said, smiling reassuringly, "I'm okay." He met my gaze, searching it for any doubt. When he found none, he smiled again and leaned in to kiss me once more. The rest of the night unfolded with a quiet kind of intimacy. We took our time, navigating this new step together with care and understanding. Everything we did was mutual, each touch, each gesture, every pause to check in. There was trust and comfort, and something that went deeper than just attraction. Later, once we were both cleaned up and settled, we laid in his bed together. The room was still and quiet, the only sound the steady rhythm of our breathing. Alex had his arm around me, holding me close, and I rested my head against his chest. Neither of us said anything for a while. We didn't need to. There was something incredibly peaceful about being in that moment. No pressure, no expectations. Just us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely safe, completely wanted, and completely seen. I looked up at him and whispered, "Thank you." He looked down and smiled, brushing his fingers through my hair. "For what?" "For being you." He kissed my forehead. "Always." And with that, we drifted off together, hearts full, hands intertwined. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.